I just saw a video of someone asking why nobody ever shortens their name in like a fun way. Like, why is Christopher always Chris instead of like Ist or whatever? Why is Elizabeth always Liz instead of like a bit? Anyway, there are unwritten rules that explain why we make the nicknames that we make in English. And I had to pull out my old linguistic notes to talk about this, but we're going to talk about it. Basically, you're going to create the nickname based on either the first syllable of the name, the stressed syllable of the name, or the second most stressed syllable of the name. So an example of the first syllable would be like if your name is Alexandra and you go by Allie, you're obviously pulling that from the first syllable of the name. But if your name is Alexander and you go by Xander, that's not the first syllable, that's the stressed syllable that you're using as the basis of the nickname. Like similarly, if your name is Alexis or Alexia or something and you go by Lexi, that's the stressed syllable. And then second most stressed syllable would be like, if your name is Elizabeth, you might go by Liz, that's the stressed syllable, but you might go by Beth, that is the secondary stressed syllable. But then we also have these weird idiosyncratic little things. So for one thing, there are sounds that we just hate to hear in a nickname. One of them is th. So yes, Beth is a nickname for Elizabeth, but also a sort of old-fashioned alternative is Bess, because we just get rid of the th and replace it with an S sound. Also, for a while, English speakers were just obsessed with rhyming, which is where we get nicknames like Bob for Robert or Bill for William. Those started as Rob and Will. And over time, people were just like rhyming and joking around, and they turned into those rhyming nicknames instead. Okay, but this is my favorite. So sometimes a nickname is just created through the misinterpretation of a sound. So my name is Eleanor. I go by L, which is like the first syllable and the stressed syllable. But some people named Eleanor instead have the nickname Nell. I've never been called that in my life, but it is a thing. Similarly, some people named Edward, instead of going by Ed, go by Ned. The reason for that is if you are affectionately referring to somebody as L or as Ed, and you say mine L or mine Ed, making it possessive, if you say that over and over again, people might start to instead hear it as my Nell, my Ned. And that is where those nicknames come from. And this is my favorite part. This is also where the word nickname comes from. So it's not named after like some guy named Nick because that's a nickname for Nicholas or something. It's because there is an older obsolete English word, eka, that means in addition to, or it means like also. So you would have an eka name, an additional name. But if you say an eka name over and over again, it starts to come out as a nickname. So that reinterpretation of where the N falls is behind a lot of English words, including nicknames like Nell and Ned, and also including the word nickname itself. Okay, I did answer this in a comment, but it got like kind of lost in the shuffle, and like 55,000 people have asked for an answer to this. Why is Dick a nickname for Richard? It's because basically of like rhyming slang. So you start off with Richard, that gets like cut down to Rick, partly because people don't really like the ch sound in nicknames, I suspect. And then you rhyme with Rick and you produce Dick, which is where that nickname comes from. At the time the nickname came about, it didn't have the secondary meaning, so it wasn't funny. Now it's funny, but like the nickname already exists, so it just sucks for you. Okay, this is slightly aggressive, but a lot of people have asked me this. So the question is like, if we got the nicknames Nell and Ned from people saying mine L, mine Ed over the years and then like reanalyzing those sounds, why were they saying that in the first place? No one says mine Ed. The answer is that people used to say a lot of things that we don't say anymore because language changes. And one of those things is the word mine as what we call a possessive determiner in that position. In Old English, that was always what you said. Starting in the Middle English period, people started to drop that N sound when the following word started with a consonant. So you would say things like my Joe, my Jane, whatever, but you would say mine Ed, mine L, mine own, etc. And it wasn't until the 18th century, so this is like modern English, that people totally dropped that N sound and just started saying my instead of mine in that position. But the paper that I'm looking at does note that you still see it in like early 19th century, early Victorian novels. So they quote a Walter Scott novel from 1821 with the line, "Go do mine errand to my father." Walter Scott was kind of known for dialect writing, so this makes sense. But the point is you're seeing this in books that people still read from as late as the 19th century. You do not have to look that far back in English to see things like mine L and mine Ed. And actually, in a sense, you don't even have to look back at all because we still have this distinction in our indefinite articles. We have A and we have N. And typically, at least in standard English, before a word that starts with a consonant, you will use A. Before a word that starts with a vowel, you will use N. If you are European and you're looking for a place to live, you'll say, I'm looking for a flat. If you are American and you're looking for a place to live, you'll say, I'm looking for an apartment. You choose which article you're going to use based on the sound that follows. A lot of people in the comments on that last video noted that this is how we got the word apron in modern English. It started as a napron, and then people started to hear it as an apron because they knew that you insert that consonant, you insert that N in front of a word that starts with a vowel. Which is analogous to someone hearing mine ed and thinking, okay, I know that that N is dropped before a vowel, so maybe they're saying mine ed. Now, some speakers and some dialects won't distinguish in that way, and they'll say things like apartment, but they are actually starting the word apartment with a consonant when they do that. It's just that the consonant is a glottal stop. So it's that little choked off sound that you hear in a phrase like apartment that you don't hear in a phrase like an apartment. But either way, there is a consonant that is making that transition between those two vowels. So I did not make this all up, as this commenter said. It's just that English has not always looked exactly the way that English currently looks.
Okay, I'm gonna explain Taylor Swift's snake symbolism as quickly as I can. Most of you are probably already familiar with the infamous incident where Kanye interrupted Taylor at the VMAs. This was an absolutely humiliating and traumatizing incident for Taylor, who is a literal child at this point, while Kanye was in his 30s. Taylor handled the situation with extraordinary grace and released a song flatly and openly forgiving Kanye for the incident. But Kanye decided that he really liked harassing Taylor and he didn't want to let it go. 7 years later, Kanye releases a song called Famous where he says, I feel like me and Taylor might still have sex, why I made that bitch famous. Before he released the song, he called Taylor and ran the lyric, I feel like me and Taylor might still have sex, ran it past her. He did not run past her, I made that bitch famous. And what he also didn't run past her is the music video in which Kanye created revenge porn without Taylor's consent, showing her naked body in bed with him. And obviously, as you can imagine, Taylor was upset. I'll do a part 2. So following the release of Famous by Kanye West, Taylor puts out a statement where she says that she would very much like to be excluded from this narrative, one that she never asked to participate in. Because again, I need to underline that from the very beginning, Kanye has instigated and driven this entire conflict. At the time, Kanye West was married to Kim Kardashian, and what Taylor didn't know is that when Kanye called Taylor to tell her that he was writing a song about her, Kim illegally recorded the entire conversation. Now, what's key to understand is that Kanye never played the song for Taylor, even though he told her that he was going to, and Kanye never ran past the lyric, I made that bitch famous. And he definitely did not ask permission to use her naked body in the video. However, Kim Kardashian took the recorded conversation and edited it to make it seem like Taylor did know about those aspects of the song and released it to the world. What ensued was a veritable feeding frenzy as the misogyny, hatred, and jealousy that millions of people feel towards Taylor Swift exploded and was vented in the form of massive pile-on internet bullying. So after Kim Kardashian instigated the internet feeding frenzy towards Taylor Swift, the insult that millions of people decided on was that Taylor Swift is a snake. What's important to understand is up until this point, the foundation of Taylor's public persona was the squeaky clean, cookie cutter, good girl. Taylor was known for an extremely innocent, kind, loving, open-hearted persona. And the muddled narrative about the Kanye West phone call gave people just a little scrap of ground to claim that all of that kindness and generosity was fake and that Taylor was actually a snake behind the scenes. If you didn't experience this in real time, it's hard to explain the magnitude of internet hatred and the way that everyone seemed to just flip a switch overnight. Taylor was on top of the world before this point and crashed, and her reputation literally seemed to go up in flames almost overnight. I'm getting comments asking for longer videos. This is going to be a long, nuanced explanation of Taylor's PR circa 2016. In 2016, Taylor Swift was probably as close to being on top of the world as a human being could be. Not only was Taylor's music insanely popular at this time, she also had this infamous squad of Victoria's Secret model best friends, and she was publicly linked to Calvin Harris at the time, making Taylor and Calvin the richest couple in the music industry at the time. Richer than Beyonce and Jay-Z. Kanye West released the song Famous on the same day that Taylor won her second Album of the Year at the Grammys for 1989. Which, a bit of context on that's important to understand is that 1989 came after Red, which was nominated and didn't win Album of the Year, although many people thought it should, but was kind of this general consensus and feeling that Taylor just seemed to be too good to be true because she was putting out banger album after banger album, being a woman in her early 20s. Taylor has always had an innate understanding of PR and has been very aware of her public perception. And at the time, she was cognizant of the fact that she was close to being overexposed in the media, to the point that in the conversation with Kanye that Kim illegally recorded, Taylor actually expressed concern that she was already overexposed and she was worried about how being involved in this narrative with Kanye could bring her even more so into the media. Taylor Swift suffers from something that I like to call the Meghan Markle effect, which is that when a woman is too polished, too poised, too composed, she seems to others to be too good to be true, and they start to question her authenticity. This certainly applies to her songwriting. Anyone with a shred of intellect can recognize that Taylor Swift has one of the greatest poetic minds of our time. And yet there will always be people who claim in my comment section and everywhere else that Taylor's songwriting is a trick, that it's not real, that they're secretly male ghostwriters. They just can't wrap their heads around how someone could really create 17 years of back-to-back-to-back-to-back hits. Now, there are valid criticisms of Taylor's public persona during this time. One that I'll point out is that her friend group, from the outside looking in, did not seem to be particularly diverse in terms of skin color or in terms of body type, especially. For these reasons, over the course of Taylor's career, there was this building undercurrent of pressure, of jealousy, frustration, irritation, rage, misogyny that people wanted to release. And when the Kim and Kanye drama went down, the floodgates opened and all of that hatred poured out onto Taylor all at once. What we know as fans is that this mentally sent Taylor off a cliff. And the way that she ended up responding to it was essentially to disappear for years. Completely took herself out of the public eye. When I say she disappeared. Nobody physically saw her. And while Taylor responded with silence, the Kardashians doubled down on this motif of Taylor is a snake, including posts from Kim and Kendall Jenner. What happened next is what I think is one of the most brilliant public relations moves in the history of the music industry. Taylor Swift decided to come back with her next album called Reputation, and she took this motif of a snake and swallowed it and turned it into her art. Taylor rolled out a snake marketing campaign and then re-entered the music public eye with the music video for Look What You Made Me Do. And the entire purpose and gist of that song is to say, you guys have driven me to snap and become the snake, the villain, the bad girl that you think that I am. This was such a thematic departure from anything that Taylor Swift had done up to this point. And for her diehard fans, that initial music video, Look What You Made Me Do, was filled with little Easter eggs alluding to every single aspect of criticism that had been levied against Taylor Swift over the last several years. The imagery of the video shows a grave that reads, "Here lies Taylor Swift's reputation," and it shows Taylor literally crawling out of this grave that the media tried to put her in and climbing back on top. What I think is amazing is that when Taylor announced the tour for Reputation, after people hadn't seen her for years, after they had thoroughly canceled her on Twitter, there were many critics and skeptics in the music industry that said that they thought that the Reputation tour would not sell at all, that she couldn't fill those stadiums. And as we know, Reputation turned out to be the most successful stadium tour in history until she topped it with the Eras tour. Long story short, Taylor Swift is the perfect example of taking your trauma and translating it into art. Outside of explicit PR statements, there have been just a few times that Taylor Swift has publicly addressed the harassment that she's received from Kanye West. Her direct response to the VMAs incident is the song Innocent, in which she says, "It's all right, life is a tough crowd, 32 and still growing up now," talking specifically about Kanye. In the chorus, she says, "It's all right, just wait and see, your string of lights is still bright to me, who you are is not what you did, you're still an innocent." She's forgiving him. It was 7 years later that Kanye picked up the phone to call Taylor about the song Famous. This was in 2016. It wasn't until 2020 that the whole phone call leaked so we could actually know what was said. And the call itself is heartbreaking. The Taylor Swift that we hear on that phone call is dramatically different from the woman that we know today. When Kanye called her up, one of her first questions is, Is It Mean? Talking about the song. In the video, you can tell that Taylor is uncomfortable, doesn't want to do it. Kanye has to talk her into the song over the course of the phone call. He never shows her the lyrics. She never okays any of it, and she says that she has to think about it. Taylor did not want to create an enemy in Kanye West, and so for years, she had just taken his absurd harassment and erratic behavior and swallowed it, absorbed it, and just tried to be cool for the sake of keeping the peace. And that's exactly the submissive, innocent, kind behavior that Kanye was hoping to capitalize on with that phone call. Kanye released the song taking credit for Taylor Swift's fame on the same day that she won her second Album of the Year at the Grammys. And in her acceptance speech, Taylor said something to the tune of, "Other people might try to take credit for your fame and for your accomplishments, and you have to ignore that." This happens in February. Kanye releases the music video in which he uses a wax figure of Taylor's naked body without her consent months later that summer. Taylor's public response to this despicable behavior really plays out in the album Reputation, and specifically in the song This Is Why We Can't Have Nice Things. In the song, she says that friends don't try to trick you, get you on the phone, and mind twist you, aka exactly what Kim and Kanye decided to do. She also talks about how I'm not the only friends you've lost lately, referencing some of Kanye's famous feuds with other artists like Jay-Z. You can also argue that the song Mad Woman has lyrics that are specifically referencing this incident. She says that women like hunting witches too. You have them do all your dirtiest work for you. She's talking about Kim being the one to record and release this call on behalf of Kanye.
I found The Perfect Match fascinating, like on a psychological level, because Perfect Match was basically like a multiverse of madness for Netflix dating shows. Like, the concept, if you're unfamiliar, is literally they just get a bunch of contestants from other Netflix reality TV shows and are like, ready, set, go, find your perfect match. Which, as asinine as it sounds, I actually kind of understand how that idea got pitched. Like, while reality TV show couples, like showmances, tend to fall apart after the show ends with rare exception, it is actually quite common for, like, former reality TV contestants to meet up at, like, cast reunions and things, fall in love and get married. And then, of course, this whole fiasco is held together by Nick Lachey, which I think Nick Lachey is the most inherently funny reality TV show host of all time. He somehow has the energy of an omnipotent god and someone who just found out what they were going to be doing on set that day at the same time, and it's incredible. Also, it's just funny to me because I feel like the transition from boy band member to reality dating host makes a weird amount of sense. Like, I can't wait to see which member of One Direction gets a reality dating show. My money's on Liam Payne. But what was so funny about Perfect Match is that it was pulling from, like, the entire Netflix catalog, right? It wasn't just, like, Too Hot to Handle, Love is Blind, Sexy Beast, their dating shows. It was also, like, The Mole, The Circle. There was a girl from Selling Sunset. But the funniest thing, and I do mean funny as in interesting and funny as in haha, but the funniest thing about The Perfect Match is that there was like a direct correlation between what show these contestants were coming from and how they conducted themselves on Perfect Match. Like, there was just such a notable difference between the way that, like, the dating show veterans, if you will, conducted themselves versus the people who have never been on a dating show before. But even within, like, the world of the reality dating shows, it was very different. Because you've got, like, Love is Blind, where the whole point is you fall in love with this person without seeing them, you form one committed bond that you're supposed to keep, and then, like, if everything goes well, you get married at the end of it. Obviously, that didn't happen for any of the people on this show, but then you've also got, like, Too Hot to Handle, where the whole point of that show is to trick a bunch of young, horny 20-somethings who literally cannot fathom spending a summer not having sex, and then you parole them with a puritanical cone. Those are two very different groups of people whose dating goals probably do not align. I employed the same strategy I always use on dating shows, which is I root for everybody black, but I side-eye the light skins a little bit, and it served me well, because Dom was wonderful and Chase was a menace. I was also rooting for everyone bisexual, and that strategy did not work out as well. Imagine fumbling Dom. Like, literally the nicest person I've ever seen on a reality TV.
Not you guys. Not you guys. Didn't mean you guys.
Yeah, I think the reason that this works and other ones don't is because in other stories, when a woman says she doesn't want to have a family and kids, and she does have them, it's presented as she didn't want to have them and she didn't know what she wanted. But in Hunger Games, Katniss does not want to have kids specifically because of the Hunger Games. She doesn't want to have to put her kids through that. So now that the Hunger Games are not a factor, she can change her mind. It's not, oh, she didn't know what she wanted. It's she didn't want to bring kids into this world, but now that world is not a thing, so she can.
Some gay men need to learn the difference between being sassy and being sexist. Boy, am I going to get attacked for saying this, but someone has to say it. My gay boys, I love you, I truly do, but some of you have this deep-rooted hatred for women plastered on your foreheads. And impressively, you've been able to camouflage it as sass to your straight besties, but girl, you're not fooling this lesbian. Now, this is about to be more than controversial, but it is so important to recognize your privilege within an oppressed minority. So for that, we're gonna start with me. I'm gay, yes, but I'm also white and straight passing, allowing me to go about my life with significantly more privilege than, let's say, a black butch lesbian. Therefore, it is my duty to forefront marginalized voices within my own community. It's really important to use my privilege to do that. So my white gay boys living in the West, you guys have the epitome of privilege, yet you throw out the oppression card as if you've been through the ringer. Before anything else, you guys are men. You're statistically the household who make the most amount of money because you have 2 male salaries. You have these strength advantages. You have most of the advantages of the patriarchy on your side. Again, this is definitely an abusive generalization and does not apply to every gay man, especially not gay men of color. And like, obviously gay men go through significantly more issues than straight men in the patriarchy, and they go through issues that even I as a woman will never be able to understand. Obviously, take what I'm saying with a grain of salt and only wear the shoe if it fits, but don't be the asshole that camouflages being a bully as being sassy. Merci, bonsoir.
One of my favorite Hunger Games details is one that I've never actually seen anyone else talk about. It's how Katniss and Peeta both sort of follow the gender stereotypes of the opposite gender. Katniss is the provider for her family. She's very athletic. She doesn't like talking about her feelings. Whereas Peeta, on the other hand, is a lot more emotional. He's a baker, he's a painter, and he's the one who comes up with the whole "if not for the baby" idea, which I feel like would be a more stereotypically women strategy, focusing on childbearing and the family. And this detail actually meant a lot to me when I was reading these books as a teen and I noticed it for the first time. I was like, whoa, these books are where gender roles go to die. And so I would absolutely love to see like a queer reading of this series. If anyone has been doing that, please tag me.
Okay, so I want to talk about this, especially since the creator mentioned how it was not good for the movie that, like, Vanellope immediately forgave Ralph and that she wanted to see a female rage scene, which doesn't fit, in my opinion. Like, a huge theme that Wreck-It Ralph plays with is the idea of, like, self-actualization as well as, like, what one's purpose is in life. That's kind of, like, a huge crux for both Vanellope and Ralph, because the movie really all starts because Ralph is starting to question his existence. We know that he's emotionally intelligent because, you know, he's finally seeking help. He's going to group therapy. He confronts Felix and the people of the tower about why he's not appreciated as much. And he starts actively trying to look for things that he knows will make him happy. Ralph is very good at what he does, and he knows exactly what he needs to do, but he hates doing it. And Vanellope, on the other hand, loves driving and she loves racing, and that's what she wants to do, but she can't do it. And so by both of them helping each other, they kind of start to realize their roles in life and how important those roles are, not just for themselves, but for the people around them, even if you're not appreciated. And this scene with the car is meant to be kind of a regression, but also a turning point for both of them. Because Ralph doesn't destroy this car for shits and giggles, you know? He doesn't do it to prove a point. He does it because at that moment, he fully believes that if she crosses the finish line in that car, she will die. And he knows that there's no way to explain it to her, especially this far into it, and she won't believe him. She'll think he's joking or something. And he knows the only way to get it through to her is to destroy the car. And in this, he's also accepting his role as the villain in this moment, because he believes that it's easier for her to blame him for destroying this, for destroying her will to race, for destroying her car that they built so hard together, rather than be faced with the reality that she was never going to in the first place, no matter how much he helped her. Ralph is coming to terms with his role as a villain, and Vanellope, meanwhile, is kind of shocked into being like, why can't I race? Everything I've done is going against me that I can't race, but I feel it. I have to be able to do this. Why are you ruining it for me once again, kind of thing. And also, Vanellope doesn't, like, immediately forgive him, you know? Like, he actually, like, works for it and, like, apologizes, and the very first thing he asks Felix is to fix the car he broke. He explains himself, he apologizes because he knows it was wrong, and he gets the car back, and he also makes sure that she crosses the finish line at any fucking purpose, you know? And I mean, also, the circumstances they're in are kind of life or death at that point, sort of shit, you know? So, I don't know, I feel like this female rage thing is kind of just taking off, where it's like, that scene didn't need female rage, it needed friends talking it out, which is what they did.
My point is that pretty privilege as an autistic and ADHD woman is not a privilege, it's a hindrance.
Okay, so I am also an autistic survivor of sexual assault, and so I just wanted to talk for a minute about why that video made me really upset and why I don't agree with any of it. And listen, I'm sure it was not this creator's intention because, as they say, they are a survivor, and as their bio says, they are 22. It's very easy to make mistakes when you are 22, but this idea that you're pushing that sexual assault is in any way attracted to connection or being pretty is actually hugely detrimental, and there's a lot of feminist literature written on why it's not true. The idea that there's really any correlation between, like, pretty privilege and sexual assault is actually incredibly damaging, especially once you stop and unpack what pretty privilege or what proximity to the beauty standard is. Because marginalization and marginalized identities are considered ugly, when in reality sexual assault is about power, which means the more marginalized you are, the more likely you are to be sexually assaulted. It's not even tone deaf, you're just wrong.
Rich bitches hated speaking Old English. They hated it. It was the common tongue.
One of my favorite things we learned in History of English is that because the noble people spoke French and the common people spoke languages of Germanic origin, all the, like, food words in English come from the French. So, like, mutton, pork, beef, but the corresponding animal words, because the common people were the ones tending to the animals, those words come from Germanic origins. So, like, pig, sheep, cow, Germanic. Pork, mutton, beef, French. Which is also why kind of fancier versions of normal things are of French origin, and then the normal things tend to be of Germanic origin, like house, Germanic, compared to German house, and manor, or like chateau, those are all French, because the fancy people were living there.
I've been waiting to talk about this one. I'm going to preface this all by saying I was unfortunately a huge Riverdale Cole Sprouse fan from 2017 to 2020, so I have a lot of opinions on this. There's a reason why his target demographic is mainly 14, 15-year-old impressionable girls, because we're most likely to mistake his arrogance for charisma or him being, like, mysterious and different and edgy. Like, speaking for myself at least, when you're at that age, you're kind of, like, attracted to that type of bad boy type, and you don't really see it as, oh, he's kind of pretentious, he's kind of a douchebag. You see it as, like, ooh, Jughead Jones, like, the allure. But no, in retrospect, he always kind of was the most pretentious little twat. His issue, this man goes to NYU, gets his little degree, is in the fine arts, whatever. He has a superiority complex. He inherently thinks that he is smarter and more enlightened and wiser than the average person, which is why he came across as so douchey in that interview. And even though I was, like, a die-hard Sprouse heart shipper, I always questioned their compatibility. Because they both seem like they would judge and make fun of the other person. Like, Lily's personality used to be very much like, Shrek is bae, I love Taco Bell, I'm so different. And then Cole was kind of the same, I'm so different, but on the opposite end of the spectrum, where he was like, I'm misunderstood. And, So, like, you think Lily would make fun of that, like, loner type, and then Cole would make fun of, like, the quirky girl type. But somehow they, like, still worked out. I think Cole's thing, though, is he loves to make everything so doom and gloom so that you kind of have to victimize him. Or at least that's his approach. Like, every interview I used to watch of him, if he wasn't at Comic-Con with the Riverdale cast and goofing off, he was talking about how much of a tortured soul he was. Like, he did an interview once with his friend where he was talking about, like, how he got into photography, whatever. And he's all like, photography saved my life. Like, it was my outlet. Listen, not invalidating that for him, but I watched that interview and cried. Why am I crying at a grown man talking about his... Like, it's weird. Now, the reason he's getting all this heat from the internet now when he used to be, I guess, beloved is because the people who were supporting him have grown up now and see, you're kind of weird. And there's no one to take our place. I feel like teenage girls have evolved now where, like, that's not the type of dude they want to fangirl over. They don't want someone who's always, no one understands me, and like, because it's like, I'm sure we do. What is there not to understand about a white man who graduated from NYU and is now an actor? That's like, I feel like that could possibly be a significant amount of the human population. So now listen, again, I don't know anything, but if I had to psychoanalyze, I think this is a man who, again, thinks he's superior to the rest of the human population, speaks down to them. And I personally think that's exactly how their relationship ended. He probably made her feel less than, like he probably did with the rest of his exes, and then comes back like, no, they emotionally cheated on me. Define the emotional cheating question. Define it. I think he's a master manipulator, and he high-key should keep Lily's name out of his mouth post this interview, because it'll only make things worse for him.
This is gonna be an unpopular opinion, but I have something to say about Bridgerton. I really don't like the rhetoric about season 3 and Penelope and Colin that's happening right now. Like, oh, they're gonna be so bad, it's gonna be so terrible. One, as a bigger girl myself, within the romance genre, and especially within the period piece romance drama category, plus size representation in like bigger girl representation is not that well, especially for on-screen depiction. We are getting a lot more in novels, but I genuinely cannot think of a live-action bigger girl representation in the period piece drama category. Also, sorry, but the actor who plays Colin looks good. Y'all are just really some haters. Please remember what Anthony looked like in season 1. Also, I'm sorry, my girl Penelope is literally Lady Whistledown. Maybe I'm just a friends to lovers girl, but let's put some respect.
Shout out to Violet Bridgerton. Let's talk about her. Violet Bridgerton is every girl when they're ovulating. She said, my garden is blooming. It was so funny when she said, it's becoming dangerous. I just, every scene of her was so adorable. And I mentioned this in my earlier video about I really love showing older women feeling that, because we as a society have such a biological clock on women. Like as soon as you turn like 35 plus, it's just assumed you ain't out here getting it. And I love that for Violet. I hope she finds somebody. I hope we get a season on that. That would be so cute. Maybe showing her story with Edmund while showing her also falling in love with somebody else. Shout out to Violet. She was great this season.
You know, I recently realized why I hate the phrase I'm not like other girls. Every time I see it in a book, a little part of me dies inside, and I never really understood why until now. It's because I am just like every other girl, and I love being just like every other girl. I love Starbucks, my little silly romance books. I live for Taylor Swift. I love rom-coms. I love having girlfriends. I love sending 10-minute long voice memos. I love makeup. I love dressing up, just like every other girl. So when a book does its best to say that one of the girls is not like every other girl, it kind of just pisses me off, because I'm like, why not? Why don't you want to be like all of us? We're awesome. You know that sound? How I love being a woman. Yeah, we're all very much superior. You should want to be just like every other girl.
Sometimes people comment on my live, you look like you'd be easy to cheat on. And to be honest, yeah, I am easy to cheat on. This might be a controversial take, but personally, I don't believe in stopping my partner from talking to other people or hanging out with certain people out of worry that they're going to cheat. Because personally, if my partner is weak enough that a girl flirting with them at a bar or one of their female friends making a move on them causes them to cheat on me, then I'm kind of relieved that I found out now, or that I found it sooner rather than later. I am not a prison ward. If I am not good enough for you, or you want someone else, like go ahead and go for them. Because then I'll just go ahead and find someone that actually cherishes me and values me. Of course, there are certain exceptions to this. Like there was this one girl when I was dating this one guy, she would like drunk call him all the time and randomly show up into his apartment unannounced. And I felt really bad doing this, but I like talked to him and I was basically like, I don't want to get in the way of your guys' friendship, but I think that since that you and I are like dating now, that you should set some boundaries with her. So I did express my discomfort. I didn't do that because I was worried he was going to cheat on me. It was just more like, even I don't go into your apartment unannounced. So I would appreciate it if this person didn't either. I won't ever stop my boyfriend from going clubbing or going out with his friends, or I won't ever stop him from being friends with certain girls because I'm worried that they're going to cheat. One of my exes did have a lot of female friends, and we went to different schools, and I didn't really mind when he went out to party or went out with his friends. The reason I never felt worried or I never really felt anxious was because he never gave me a reason to worry. He always showed me that he was very devoted to me, and he was really down bad for me. I was technically cheated on before. It was like an exclusive situationship. After he told me about his infidelity, I felt relief more than anything. And I kind of felt bad for him because he just showed me through his actions that he has a very weak moral compass. And I already felt kind of iffy about him, so I was just relieved that I found out how much of a shitty person he was in the beginning rather than later. Because the bottom line is, even if someone is completely throwing themselves at you, the decision to cheat is 100% up to you. And if you do cheat, it just means that you weren't the right person for me to begin with. And I'll go ahead and find someone that actually cherishes me and actually values me. And honestly, I hope that they can find that person that's right for them in the future as well. Of course, if one of your female friends is throwing themselves at you and is begging you to cheat on me with them, then in that case, I think for the sake of setting boundaries, you should probably cut that person off. When one of my friends got cheated on, he kept on asking me, like, what's wrong with me? Why wasn't I ever good enough? And I hope for anyone that's ever been cheated on, you realize that you're never the problem. The other person is. Because if they're weak enough to not value you and cherish you, then that's their loss. And they're gonna have a really hard time finding someone that will put up with their weak morals. And they're just gonna live a very unsatisfied life.
If you're a dumb idiot when it comes to makeup, keep on watching because I'm gonna explain it all for you right now. I'm about to give you guys all of the tips and tricks that I use on a daily basis when I do my makeup, so keep on watching. Make sure to moisturize your face before doing your makeup. It makes the world of a difference and it makes all of your makeup go on so much easier. I like to start off with my eyebrows because I use a eyebrow gel like this. This is called the e.l.f. Brow Lift. I use the brow brush first, dip into the product, and I coat my brows upward. If you have stubborn eyebrows, you can go back and forth with the product. And then you will go back and you will put the brows into place. If you guys don't know what primer is, primer basically is something you're gonna put on before you put on foundation. If I was going to use a primer, it would be to fill in my pores. So I use this one. This is by SheGlam. This is the Birthday Skin Primer. You're just gonna work it into your skin, kind of like it's a lotion. I put way too much. So in the summertime, I don't really like using foundations. I like using tinted moisturizers. I'm gonna use the Laura Mercier tinted moisturizer today. I like blending in my tinted moisturizers with my fingers, but you can use a beauty sponge. You want to make sure not to bring your foundation or tinted moisturizer underneath your eye. The less makeup that's underneath your eyes, the better, because you do not want your under eyes looking cakey. Okay, so now that it's mostly blended in, I'm gonna go in with my beauty blender. Don't forget to bring it down your neck. You never want to be caught dead with that harsh line of foundation. Now there's two types of concealer that I want to explain to you. There's more of a lightweight concealer and then there's more of a thicker, heavier concealer. Lightweight concealer I like to use for underneath my eyes. Heavier concealer I like to use for concealing things like pimples, scars, things like that. For a heavier concealer, honestly, there's nothing better than the NARS Soft Matte Concealer. How I like using this concealer is taking a concealer brush, something like this, and you're gonna dip into the pot, and you're gonna just apply it on any blemishes or dark spots that you have. I also like using this concealer on my nose because my nose gets really red around the corners. We're gonna let this sit. The longer you're gonna let your concealer sit like this, the more coverage it's going to give you. Now, for under eyes, this is the best concealer ever. I recommend it to everyone. The Bare Minerals Original Liquid Mineral Concealer. I like having concealer that is more close to my skin tone. I just like the way it looks better, but you totally can get a concealer in a few shades lighter to brighten up your face. So now we're gonna let this sit. We're gonna go back to the NARS concealer now, and we're gonna just blend it in with our finger, simply tapping on top and making sure it's all blended in. And after I blend it out with my finger, I like to go back over with the sponge just to make sure everything's blended in seamlessly. For the concealer under the eyes, I like to use a brush. This is a new thing I've liked to do. The concealer I like to use is more of an orangey tone. Orange and blue are opposite on the color wheel, so if you're gonna use like an orangey toned concealer, it's gonna cancel out the dark circles. You can go back in with your sponge if you want, just to pick up any extra product. Okay, now for contour, we're gonna go in with the Patrick Ta contour, and I'm gonna take it on a brush like this, kind of a smaller brush so you get more precise. Not going to place your contour underneath your cheekbone. That is going to drag your face down. You are going to place your contour on top of your cheekbone, like so. I like applying my contour in a dabbing motion. You're never just gonna swipe it on. And once you do your makeup for a long time, you're gonna start to just learn your face and learn where you're gonna place all these products. But it is kind of challenging to figure out where to place it in the beginning. If you wanna make your forehead appear smaller, you're gonna take your contour and you're going to place it on the top. This is going to reduce that appearance of your five head. If you would like to do your jawline, please be careful and make sure to blend it. See where that natural shadow is? That's what you're gonna enhance. I also like bringing it up and connecting it. See the difference? Now, nose contour is kind of challenging to figure out. Everyone is going to contour their nose differently for what they need. I like my nose to look as small as possible. I like to look like I cannot breathe. So what I'm going to do, take my contour shade, and I'm going to first apply it at the bottom. This is going to make my nose look more lifted. Now I'm going to take it and go up kind of into my eyebrow. I feel like this just makes my nose look more small throughout the bridge. I honestly just put 2 little dabs of product and then 1 across, and that's what I do for my nose contour. See how I kind of look like a deer? That's what I want to look like. Now we're gonna blend it in. I like to go in with a bigger brush. We're gonna go in and we're just gonna dab. Lightly dab in, and if you have a good product, it will blend. We are dabbing. We are not dragging. Dragging, no good. You also want to make sure to keep your product in the place you placed it. You don't want to be swiping all over and it's gonna move the contour contour around and then you're gonna end up making your face look all long. Not cute. For nose contour, I like taking my beauty blender and I just go over everything and it kind of just automatically blends it for you. Okay, next we have blush. You can use cream or liquid blush, whatever you choose. This is my new favorite blush. This is by Say Beauty. This is the shade Chili. If you want the lifted effect, you're going to apply your blush on the high points of your cheek. Also apply a little dab of blush on the part of my nose that I contoured. I just think it looks really cute. With blush, I like using a brush over my sponge because the sponge picks up a lot of the product and I just dab it in place. Once again, with the dabbing. Also, if you guys don't know, blush is the first thing to fade on your face. Blush just fades really fast. So that's why I like to put a little bit more blush on because I know it will fade by the end of my makeup. Okay, next is highlighter. I love using liquid highlighter. It's just my favorite thing ever. This is the best liquid highlighter I have ever used in my life. It's by Rare Beauty in the shade Flaunt. I put it on the tip of my nose and then I'll just do like 2 dots on the high point of my cheek. I blend this in with my finger and I'll just dab it and I bring it underneath my eyebrow. Okay, next we have powder. I'm gonna go in with my Charlotte Tilbury powder today. Before you put your powder under your eyes, you want to make sure there are no creases. I like to just dab underneath my eyes to make sure I'm not creased under there. And then you're just going to dab. Do you see already how much more blurred that looks? I used to be scared of powder. I used to be scared, oh my god, I'm gonna look cakey. It's gonna look bad. No, powder fixes everything. So if you have any type of texture, you just put your powder right on it, boom, blurred, gone. Now something that really helps minimize the look of powder is setting spray. I like to take my setting spray and I like to spray my face in between every powder step or every other powder step. It just melts all the products together. Let it marinate now. This is a good time to clean off your lips from all of the gross powder and stuff. So after I just sprayed my face, I let it dry and now I'm gonna curl my eyelashes for the first time in this routine. Okay, after we curled, put that away for now. We're gonna go in with powder bronzer and powder blush. For powder bronzer, this is Physicians Formula. We're going in and we're just gonna enhance where we put the contour earlier. And honestly, with powder bronzer, I go in with a fluffy brush that you would use for eyeshadow, and I just put it in my crease just to warm up everything and to tie the colors in. I also put a little bit underneath my eyes. Time for blush. I just go like this. I don't pick a color. I like all the colors, and I just apply it on the high points of my cheeks just to accentuate what we put on before. We're gonna curl our eyelashes again before we put on our mascara. By the way, this is the best eyelash curler I've ever used. This is by Tweezerman. Now you're also probably wondering if we're ever gonna do anything with our eyebrows again. I would recommend doing your eyebrows again after you put on powder so your powder doesn't get in your eyebrows. I like doing it before I do my mascara. I use this little pen. I just line the bottom of my eyebrow and fill in any sparse areas. Okay, now time for mascara. If you want your eyelashes to stay up all day, waterproof mascara is the way to go, but I hate taking off waterproof mascara. So I use regular. This is the L'Oreal Telescopic Carbon Black Mascara. Best mascara ever. I love it so much. Honestly, drugstore mascaras are better than high-end mascaras, and they're way more affordable. Don't buy an expensive mascara. You don't need it. I like focusing my mascara on the outer corners of my eyes because it makes my face look elongated. It's okay if you get it on your eyelid like I just did. I'll show you how to take that off. Okay, our mascara is dried and now it's time to take off the stuff that's got on our eyelid. You can either go in with a spoolie brush or Q-tips. I'm gonna show you both ways. So you take a spoolie brush like this and you're just gonna simply scratch it off. Once it's dry, it should just flake right off. Or you can use a Q-tip. I like using a Q-tip if I don't have any eyeshadow on because it's just easier. Yeah, if you have eyeshadow on though, definitely use the spoolie trick. Okay, time for lips. We're going in with our lip liner first. This is by NYX in the shade Peekaboo Neutral. I need a new one, clearly. I don't line the corners. I feel like it makes my mouth look too long. I like lining just the top. If you want to overline a little bit, that's perfectly fine. See how that already just made my lips look like a Bratz doll? I love the way that looks. And then I go for the bottom. I just put a little bit in the middle. And then you can fill in a little bit if you want. Now, if you want a little bit of shine, this is a lip oil. This is by Sigma. I love it so much. I just put it on and it kind of blends the lip liner for you. Look how cute and juicy our lips look now. Okay, now if you haven't noticed, our eyelashes have fallen. So we're gonna go in and just curl. Apparently you're not supposed to do this. I've always done it. If your eyelashes fall out, don't blame me. And there we go. This is how I get the basic look. It's a lot of steps to look this good, isn't it? Ew, why did I just sound like that? Now you can go in one more time with your setting spray. Remember to comment below if you guys want me to do a drugstore or a high-end version of this. If you guys want more in-depth of either each step or in-depth of each product, let me know, okay? I love you guys so much. I'll see you in the next one.
One of my favorite things about Taylor Swift is how she just like lies for no reason sometimes. Lie is a strong word. It's never important enough to where it matters. And it's often during live shows, like she'll be introducing a song and say it's about something. And I'm always like, is that true? Like when she said the other day that Cruel Summer has always been her favorite song off of Lover. Has it? Because I feel like when the album came out, her favorite was like Lover or The Archer. Like, I almost feel like she said what her favorite was and it was a different song. Or like 2 nights ago when she said, I don't care about anything that happened to me when I was 19. Like, girl, you wrote Would've, Could've, Should've like a year or 2 ago. By the way, won't be hating on that man. I wasn't gonna do that anyway. Or this wasn't necessarily a lie, but it has the same energy when she was like introducing Question and she was like, I've never felt happier in my life. Everything makes sense. So I'm gonna sing this song. I was like, girl, what are you talking about? And then I have such a vivid memory of being at the 1989 tour. And before she sang All You Had to Do Was Stay, she told this story about how it was inspired by a fan who she had met, who had been telling her about the breakup she was going through. And that's what inspired All You Had to Do Was Stay. And I'm like, is that true? Because I feel like she's actually never told that story. Because in interviews, she talks about how it was inspired by a dream. So what are you talking about? But I genuinely, like, when I say I like it, I'm not even kidding. Like, I like it. Lie. Change the story. I don't care. Oh, how could I forget the biggest offense when she told us that no one had guessed the album title, even though Lover was giant in the background of the Me music video, and like literally everyone and their mother had guessed that Lover was gonna be the title. She was like, I haven't seen anyone guess it yet. Girl, yes, you literally have.
Don't you love when feminism goes so far it turns into its own misogyny? The commentary around the Barbie movie has been nothing short of delusionally hilarious. First of all, I don't know why you want my girl to be a bimbo so bad, but she was never giving dumb, okay? Barbie quite literally is a feminist icon. Do y'all really not remember what Barbie's mission was? Why she had 7 million jobs? Is the pink really throwing y'all off that severely? And speaking of pink, what is an unintelligent outfit? She's just wearing pink. Listen, I didn't grow up a girly girl, though I'm much more feminine now, but I had no idea this is what my sisters across the aisle were dealing with. God forbid you like pink. God forbid you like sparkles. God forbid you like being feminine or girly. Society really treats you like you don't have shit going on in your head, and it's insane. You would think we would be so much further along by now.
You know what's crazy? Being a celebrity and then your fans saying that they love you and shit, and then you saying as a celebrity who wouldn't be where you're at without your fucking fans, as a celebrity you say that I don't fucking love y'all because I don't know y'all. Imagine that. That's crazy. And like in the midst of saying all that, you're dating someone who I'm pretty sure is a groomer. Like, I don't know much, but I know he's a bad guy. And instead of like acknowledging it and shit, you kind of just block people who are letting you know what the fuck is wrong with you. Imagine that. Not only that, you're falling off, and you're falling off hard. Very, very hard. Damn.
My favorite part of the Barbie movie is the part where Margot Robbie's like, I don't want to hurt him. And America Ferrera's like, well, he did steal your house, brainwash your friends, and try to take over the government. Because if that isn't a conversation I've had with so many women about a man, she's like, yeah, I don't want to hurt him. And you're like, yeah, but he did, lie to you, cheat on you, hurt you, lead you on, play with your feelings, manipulate you, gaslight you. And she's like, yeah, but I don't want to hurt him. Like, that scene was so accurate.
I think the corniest, most embarrassing argument that men publicly make for some reason is, I should be allowed to like models' photos. I should be allowed to like bikini pictures if I'm in a relationship, and you can't tell me no. And we know that you clock when another woman is hot. We know human nature. We're people too. I'm sitting here looking at Cindy Sweeney's Instagram too. Okay, we all know. If you were hanging out with all your boys, you're hanging out with your guy friends on a guy's night, your girlfriend's not there, and a beautiful supermodel looking woman walks by, you're probably all gonna look at each other and be like, damn, look at that. We know that. We know. And most of us don't give a shit. We're gonna notice if another woman is beautiful, okay? Enjoy. Look at her, enjoy it, and move on. However, if you were on a guy's night, but your girlfriend was there, and you still looked at this beautiful woman walking by, and in front of your girlfriend, were like, damn, look at her. I'd fuck that if I had the chance. That's humiliating. That is degrading to your girlfriend. It's embarrassing. It's public humiliation. Everyone knows that you're in a relationship, so why are you like publicly announcing to the world that you're saving that for the spank bank? What are you doing when you like Sydney Sweeney's Instagram photo? What do you think is gonna happen? You think she's gonna DM you and be like, hey, I saw your like? No, you just look like a fucking corny loser. You look desperate and horny. It's like your dogs. Like you have to pee and mark your territory. Why? Why do you have to like it? Just look at it.
I think it's objectively true that if you made a Venn diagram of people who love gossip and the people whose favorite subject in school was history, that Venn diagram would be a circle. Because history class at its core is just drama. It's like reality TV. It's so entertaining. I remember when I read about the Zimmerman telegram, when Germany sent a letter to Mexico shit-talking the United States, saying they should link up, and then it got intercepted and sent to the US instead. I was gagged. I was reading a textbook, but it felt like I was reading Dumas. I was like, what is Germany gonna do to save face from this one?
This is part 1 in a series I'm starting where I'll talk about whatever community the filter lands on. Let's talk about intersex. Intersex describes individuals who are born with variations in their physical sex characteristics that do not fit typical definitions of male or female. These variations can present in chromosomes, hormones, or even reproductive anatomy. Intersex Awareness Day is October 26th, and 1.7% of the population is estimated to be born with intersex characteristics. That's roughly the same amount of people as are born with red hair. Yellow and purple were chosen for the flag because these do not represent traditional gender associations, and the circle represents, quote, wholeness and completeness, pushing back on claims that intersex people lack these. Intersex is a part of LGBTQIA+ because their challenges, discrimination, and stigmatization are also based on gender identity and sexual characteristics. Intersex individuals also break down binary notions of sex and gender and allow for greater understanding of human diversity. Happy Pride! This is part 2, making a video on whatever community the filter picks for me. Let's talk about bisexuality. Bisexuality is defined as the attraction to more than one gender, with the pink of the flag representing attraction to one's own gender, the blue representing attraction to a different gender, and the purple in between representing attraction to 2 or more genders. Bisexual Appreciation Day is September 23rd, and this is actually the most commonly reported sexual orientation by members of the LGBTQ+ community, with more than 11 million bisexual adults in the United States. In case you were wondering, that's a larger population than 42 of our 50 states. Even though bisexuals are our largest demographic, biphobia continues to persist outside and inside of our spaces. So as a loving reminder, your bisexuality is valid regardless of the gender of your current partner. Anyone who tries to tell you otherwise lacks object permanence like a baby, and your bisexuality exists whether they see it in front of their face or not. Part 3, making a video on whatever community the filter gives to me. Let's talk polysexuality. Polysexuality is characterized as attraction to multiple genders, but not necessarily all genders. Polysexuality is technically seen as under the, quote, bi umbrella, and many people use bisexuality and polysexuality interchangeably. However, many feel that for them, polysexuality does a better job of staying away from gender binaries than bisexuality, and provides a more open and fluid way to express an attraction that includes gender nonconforming or non-binary individuals. And while polysexuality is certainly seeing an increase in visibility now, that term has actually been used since at least the 1990s to discuss queer attraction. In the polysexual flag, the pink represents attraction to women, the blue represents attraction to men, and the green represents attraction to non-binary or gender non-conforming individuals. And finally, Polysexual Visibility Day is July 26th. Happy Pride! Continuing the series where I talk about whatever community this filter lands on. All right, let's talk about lesbians. While some see the definition of lesbian as women exclusively attracted to other women, I think it's important to make space for our non-binary family and define it as non-men attracted to non-men. And our flag agrees with me. While the pink and purple represent love and femininity, the orange and red represent nonconformity and independence. The word lesbian comes from the Greek isle Lesbos, home of the famed poet Sappho, who wrote about her love for women. Queer women will often refer to themselves as sapphics, which is a reference to her. Did you know L wasn't always the first letter in LGBT? It used to be GLBT. During the AIDS crisis, lesbians stepped up to provide medical care to and advocate for the members of our community that society had left behind. In the aftermath, as a thank you and sign of solidarity, GLBT community centers around the country made the switch. So go lesbians! This is part 5 in my series where I'm talking about whatever community the filter gives me. Let's talk about asexuality. Although we're certainly seeing an increase in asexual visibility now, from what I could find, the term has actually been around since at least 1897. While asexuality itself is defined as a lack of sexual attraction to others, it is also considered an umbrella term. And underneath this ace umbrella are also individuals who feel that their sexual attraction only exists under very specific circumstances. For example, demisexuals. In the asexual flag, purple represents community, black represents asexuality, white represents sexuality, and the gray stripe between them represents the literal gray area that many asexuals feel their attraction lies in. And while we obviously cannot confirm this now, many people believe that Marilyn Monroe actually existed on the spectrum of asexuality. In her biography, she wrote, "The truth was, for all my lipstick, my mascara, and my precarious curves, I was as unsensual as a fossil." This is part 6, I believe, in my series where I'm talking about whatever community this filter gives me. Let's talk about transgender. Transgender is an umbrella term relating to anyone whose gender identity or expression does not correlate to the sex they were assigned at birth. There are 1.6 million transgender adults in the United States. For comparison, that's larger than the population of Hawaii. For further comparison, that's actually more than every law enforcement occupation in the country combined, from cops to game wardens. So don't let anyone tell you you're too small of a group to matter. Transgender Day of Visibility is March 31st, and November 20th is Transgender Day of Remembrance for those whose lives were lost due to anti-trans violence. The pink and blue on the flag are nods to traditional masculinity and femininity, while the white is representative of anyone transitioning or who has a neutral or undefined gender identity. And transgender individuals are an irreplaceable part of our community, having been at the forefront of our activism, advocacy, culture, and creativity. This is part 8 on making videos on whatever flag/community this filter gives me. Let's talk about non-binary. Non-binary is an umbrella term describing individuals who do not fit neatly into our binary system of man or woman, whether that be existing outside the gender binary, identifying with it to varying degrees, or identifying as completely gender apathetic. This umbrella is represented within the non-binary flag, with yellow for those who do not identify as man or woman, purple for those who identify as a mix between them, white for those with many or all genders, and black for those with no gender at all. Did you know the public existence of non-binary individuals in this country goes back to at least 1776? A Quaker preacher in Massachusetts began exclusively identifying as public universal friend, avidly refused any gendered name or pronouns, and spent the next 4 decades collecting followers who also rejected gender norms. And in 2021, a survey found that 1 in 4 LGBTQ+ youth identify as non-binary, underscoring the importance of awareness and support. With that in mind, Non-Binary Peoples Day is coming up on July 14th.
Cis is not a liberal buzzword. It's literally just a Latin prefix that means on this side of. It's the opposite of trans, which is the Latin prefix meaning on the other side of. Cis just means that you have spent your entire life on the same side of your own womanhood. It's not an insult. It's just a descriptor we use to make sure we're being precise in our language. If I call my margarita a frozen margarita, everyone still knows it's a margarita. Cheers.
Riordan-verse opinions I don't say because they turn my comment section into a living hell. Annabeth and Rachel are like the same person in a different font, and I don't even mean that as a neg. I just mean Percy has a type, and it's girls who are mean to him. I'm not saying Luke was right, but I definitely would have thought about joining his side longer than anyone would have been comfortable with. Like, I would not have joined him. I would have brought up the fact that he has a point in probably every meeting. The only time I have truly felt contempt for Jason Grace was when he pulled that, well, I personally wasn't there shit about the Romans fighting on the Confederate side of the Civil War. We know, Jason, you don't have to be so white all the time. No disrespect to Percy, but Piper and Annabeth dating would have fundamentally changed my brain chemistry for the better. I really do hope we make it to a Heroes of Olympus TV show, because this isn't like a neg on the original series, but those books do more naturally lend themselves to like a TV format. Bringing it back to Piper for a second, I cannot stand when white girls say she has not like other girls syndrome. That is such an oversimplification, like y'all don't get it. The first interaction we see her have with other girls is them being racist and telling her to do a rain dance, and then Leo tells Jason not to do anything because she likes to fight her own battles, implying that happens pretty frequently. Nearly every single white woman Piper comes in contact with either tries to force her into a painfully white version of femininity she has no interest in conforming to, or belittles her completely and disregards her. Piper does not have not like other girls syndrome. Piper has the other girls are racist, and so is the society we live in, and thus it's very difficult for me as an indigenous girl to navigate my femininity syndrome. And that's not me reaching, that's in the text. Like, half of Piper's arc is about her coming to terms with being biracial. Aphrodite has a whole thing where she talks about how she was the oldest and most powerful Olympian, and as the gods moved west, as our concepts of love and beauty became more westernized, it got reduced to girly, frilly pink shit.
I'm not saying there wasn't some misogyny in the way that Rick Riordan originally wrote the Aphrodite Cabin. I'm saying he clearly realized that, created an entire character to try and unpack it, and some of y'all missed the message because you failed to consider how Piper being not white impacts her storyline. Clarice is a great example of how bully redemption always works better when your bully's not a bigot. She truly just is mean to everybody. Also, I'm sorry, but the idea of a black Clarice raising an army of Confederate soldiers from the dead and being like, I'm the overseer now, bitch, is funny to me. That shit's funny to me. Far and away, my most controversial Riordan-verse opinion, like the one I didn't even put in that video because I knew it was going to eat up the entire comment section if I did, is I do not care for the Kane Chronicles, and I would rather see literally any of the Riordan Presents books turned into a movie or a limited series over that. I cannot stand Sadie Kane. And that's one of those things that you say and then everybody's hackles go up. And I've got to remind people that Sadie Kane isn't real. She's a character constructed by Rick Riordan, a white man who has never had the experience of being a 12-year-old biracial girl and thus never really had to think about or live through the stereotypes they endure. I have, though. It actually makes me angry that the Kane Chronicles were coming out like at the same time Twilight was starting to fall out of popularity. So at the same time, culture was starting to be like, you know, don't you think it's a little weird that this 100-year-old dude is staring at a 17-year-old in her sleep? Rick Riordan then decided to put Sadie Kane, who's like 12 years old when you meet her, in a relationship with Anubis, an ancient god, and a 16-year-old. And that really chased my chaps for two reasons. The first of which is that that's kind of a pattern for Riordan, putting his black female characters in relationships with older boys. He does a similar thing with Hazel and the Heroes of Olympus. And before you rush to my comment section to talk about a 2-year age gap, don't. You're just gonna piss me off. I'm not worried about the logistics. I'm worried about the adultification of black children, which is a product of racism, wherein black children are expected to grow up faster than their white peers. And the way that Rick Riordan writes his black girls absolutely points to them being adultified. Like, as much as I love Annabeth being black, it does also make her a part of that trend, right? Like, all of Rick Riordan's black girl characters have this element of, like, at one point or another being the youngest on the team, but still feeling like they're much older than they are. And so they engage in relationships with, like, boys who are older than they are and are also given a disproportionate amount of responsibility in comparison to their peers. I just don't like watching a white guy continuously give that to black girls. Call me crazy. But that's the thing. It's not like I wasn't being fetishized and getting attention from older men when I was Sadie Kane's age. I absolutely was, and I hated it. So the fact that it was played for a love triangle in her story, like, I can't even lie. That really fucked me up. I read the Kane Chronicles series once and then never went back to, because I couldn't do it. I could not live with that love triangle again. Oh, God. Okay, so in true Kenna fashion, I'm gonna answer this question by only 25% answering it and 75% talking about something I've been thinking about for like 3 days anyway. Because the fascinating thing about this question is that you're specifying Suzanne Collins, right? And not just like the Hunger Games franchise, which of course includes not only the books, but the movies. And I would very much argue that the Hunger Games movies feel a lot more white than the Hunger Games books. But the way that whiteness impacts the Hunger Games movies is a huge part of why I think it became such a massive cultural phenomenon. But, fascinatingly enough, the Hunger Games books feel less white to me, a non-white person, for the same reason why so many white people were genuinely shocked when Rue was cast as a black girl. Because Suzanne Collins did something a lot of dystopian and fantasy writers do, which is accepting that race as a construct as we understand it in our world would not exist in the fantasy world you're created. And so Rue is never called African American or black. She's brown-skinned with thick curly hair. Katniss is olive-skinned. And the thing about the term olive-skinned is that it can be used to describe a pretty wide range of skin tones and ethnicities. I've been called olive-skinned in my life, and so when I was reading Katniss, I just assumed she wasn't white. And while that vagueness in the books, I think, allowed a lot of non-white people to see and place and picture themselves in a story where they otherwise might not have. That doesn't really exist in the movies, right? Like, for lack of a better phrasing, you have no choice but to see Katniss as a white woman in the Hunger Games movies because Jennifer Lawrence is playing her and she's a white woman. And so my one big critique of the Hunger Games in terms of whiteness and race would be that pretty much every black character you meet not only dies, but dies martyring themselves for Katniss, a white woman, in one way or another. And when you think about the Hunger Games in the context of the time period it was coming out, which the first movie came out the same year that Trayvon Martin was murdered, while I still find it grating, it makes perfect sense to me why so many white people immediately jumped to "this is the Hunger Games" when the Black Lives Matter riot started in 2020. Because I will always argue that Katniss's first true act of revolution is the three-fingered salute she throws up after Rue dies. Before then, everything she does still ultimately plays into the game maker's hands in the entertainment factor. It's finding solidarity with somebody who it doesn't really benefit her to ally with, and being bold enough to say this kid we all considered expendable needs to be mourned that actually starts a revolution.
This is far and away one of my favorite things about the Hunger Games, is that it really is a story about the necessity of love in revolution. Everything Katniss does to challenge the Capitol comes from a place of caring about the people who are next to her. It's really that simple. Katniss, as a 17-year-old struggling to feed her family in District 12, probably didn't think very much about the plights of District 11 prior to meeting Rue, because why would she? She's so caught up in her day-to-day and just trying to survive. But because of who Katniss is as a person, when she gets to the games and sees a 12-year-old thrown into the games with no chance of survival, she doesn't do what a lot of the other contestants do. She doesn't buy in to this fake box that their society has put them in, which is why I really understand when people say Katniss is autistic. I 100% get that read. She sees Rue not as a competitor from District 11, but as somebody in the situation that she's there to prevent, right? Katniss volunteered because Prim is 12, and she would not stand a chance in the competition. And Katniss being able to recognize Rue as her sister, as somebody who she has solidarity with, as somebody who shares her struggle, and thus she goes out of her way to protect her, that's the revolution. The games are an incredibly effective tool of oppression and of destroying solidarity amongst the citizens of Panem, because it's a televised event that not only highlights the financial disparities against the districts, but it pits them against each other in a way that, like, obscures who the real enemy is. You don't see the game makers as an audience member watching the games. You see a bunch of rich kids from the career districts murdering everybody else most of the time. But originally, the Capitol loved Katniss, because having a kind of like, I'm just a girl from District 12, I really don't have any special advantages, underdog story still serves their narrative, provided she was willing to buy into what the games really do that I think is destructive, which is force you to see a bunch of teenagers as gladiators, as people whose job it is to fight and die, simply because their names got pulled out of a hat. When Katniss volunteers for Prim, it's absolutely an act of love, but it is quite literally her agreeing to play the system's game in order to save her family. When she fires her arrow at the game makers, it's mostly just an act of aggression, and it still plays into the entertainment. But when Katniss holds a memorial for Rue, she says without saying the thing the game makers want you to forget. These are real kids with real families at home who will mourn them, and this is a tragedy. And that's what starts the revolution, is Katniss allowing herself to feel love for people the Capitol doesn't want her to love. And that's why I'm an abolitionist. It's Suzanne Collins.
That line in the new Olivia Rodrigo song that's like, I pull up to your place on the second floor and you're standing smiling like at the door, and I'm sure I've seen Much Hotter Men, but I really can't remember when. That line eats for more reasons than what I think you guys are realizing. Everyone's fixated on the part about a man like being hot that like is probably ugly, but he's hot to you, or he's hot because it's 2 a.m. and that's a wonderful line. But the line before that, the line about him standing and smiling in the door on the second floor of the apartment building, that means that he did not go down and get her. That means that he buzzed her in and she went up the elevator alone and she didn't know which way to go down the hallway. She probably turned the wrong way because earlier in the song it says that he is sending her his new address because she has not been there before because they have not dated in a while, and he did not even go down and get her to help her in the fucking door. Never mind the fact that he's standing and smiling. Oh, he's so fucking cocky, huh? Oh, you're here at my new apartment? Oh, you texted me? Like, shut the fuck up. So good, because she's like, yeah, you look really hot right now and I have to be in your apartment, but she's also like, no, you're a piece of shit. Like, I haven't been to this place before and you can't even come down and get me. And then you're smiling.
I'm seeing a little too much Belly slander on my timeline, and I want to correct it. Belly is not in the wrong. She's doing exactly what Susanna told her. Susanna said, I always knew you were destined to be with one of my boys. What do you think that's going to do psychologically to a young little girl? And then her dying wish was for Belly to take care of her boys. Take care of them. Second of all, she's too young for Conrad. Point blank period. You're not going to get any arguments out of me. When you're a child, those 1, 2, 3 year differences make a huge difference. Connie, baby, you're not telling me there's not a freshman girl you're interested in? You're still pressed behind this high school girl who you thought of as a kid sister up until recently, up until she gets fine. And that is my third and final point. Do they really love her, or do they just show interest in her when she started getting pretty? I lied, that's not my final point. My final point is that Belly doesn't know how to be pretty. She's not used to this attention. She's not used to being adored and desired. She's been a kid for so long, and now she finally has it, and she doesn't know what the fuck to do with it. Oh, and one more point. I know that Susanna's not her mom, and so she's not allowed to grieve in the same way that everyone else is. But homegirl's middle name is Susanna. A bitch is suffering. She's suffering. Leave her alone. Okay, this is for real. My last point, my last actual point. Laura was out of her fucking mind when she slapped Belly. You weren't there, Laurel. You weren't there. Maybe if you were around emotionally, you would have saw the signs that Belly wasn't doing so hot. So, slap yourself.